topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask Good Questions podcast, broadcasting live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio at W4CY.com. This week and every week, we will reach for a higher purpose in money and life, as well as a focus on health and wellness. Now, let's join your host, Benita Bell Anderson, as together we start with Asking Good Questions.
Hello and welcome to the Ask Good Questions podcast. I am so happy that you're here with us today. My name is Benita Bell Anderson, and we are going to have a fantastic topic today in talking about getting out of your own way and finding and fulfilling your true calling. We're going to get into that. So I'd like to invite my guest to the proverbial podcast stage. His name is Scott Maderer. Did I say that right?
It's actually Maderer.
Maderer.
I know it looks like it's spelled wrong, but
Maderer. So I want to.
That's okay. You're not the first person that's ever pronounced it that way. Maderer.
Right. So Scott is in Texas, and I'm in Hawaii. As some of you may know, we're here for like another 7 months. Our year in Hawaii is going fast. But let me tell you a little bit about Scott, and then I'm going to have him, expound just a tiny bit more on who he is. He is an expert in helping people transition from working to living their calling. So I'm going to be asking you that first, Scott. So whatever that looks like for them, he speaks on helping people identify their calling, get out of their own way, so they can really live it out, and how they can deal with their time. And these are the three things he really gets into: time, talent, and their treasures. So he talks on productivity and time management. He talks on leadership and communication, business and personal money and finances. He's actually certified in DISC personality and communication tools, which I may have you explain just exactly what that is. And he has been a working coach since 2011, doing coaching full-time since 2017. So he specializes in mindset and behavior change more than the tools that he uses. So Scott, do you have anything you want to add to that about who you are and what you're bringing to this?
The only things I'll add, I'm married. I have a beautiful wife, Carrie. She supports the business behind the scenes. She doesn't like to be in front of the camera or on the mic, but she likes to be at the back of the room, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's her gifting and her thing, but she definitely supports me in the business as well. I have an adult son. He lives about 3 hours away from us. For some reason, he wanted to move up to Dallas and be closer to his girlfriend instead of closer to mom and dad.
Oh, come on.
I know. I don't get it, but yeah, exactly. So he's up there working and living. And like I tell people, he's actually managed to move out of the house and hasn't come back yet. So we'll count that as a win.
That's a win. So, okay. So I'm going to try to break this down, because you know what's interesting, when we're both members of this thing called Podmatch, and I look for people that can give like a little bit of a spin. I've been a financial educator for a gazillion years. And now with the podcast, I also do health and wellness. Well, I found that there seems to be a lot of overlap with how healthy you are and the money and how well you handle money. But the whole mindset thing comes up a lot. And so what I'd like to start with is this whole finding your calling idea. What does that living your calling or trying to find your true calling, what does that really mean to you? And how is it different from just, having a career?
Yeah, let's back up a step. So there's actually two words that we use a lot interchangeably, but they mean completely different things. And we've
Okay.
sort of lost track of that. And the word career and the word vocation, we treat them as if they mean the same thing. They don't.
Right.
So let's go back to the root word, right? What does the word career come from? It actually comes from a word in Latin that means cart. So a
Oh,
career is a cart. It's something that gets you from point A to point B,
you're carrying.
carrying something. It's a mode of
Yeah.
transportation, right?
Okay.
Vocation comes from the same root word in Greek as vocalis, which means to be spoken to. Vocalization, vocal. We hear those words in vocation. There's a
Yeah.
reason those words sound
Yeah.
alike, because they all really come from the same word. Well, by
Right.
definition, if you're being spoken to, that means that there's a speaker, right?
Right.
That's the only way to be
Duh.
spoken to is someone's talking.
Yeah.
So vocation is really more about what you are called. We use the word calling to do. It means that some higher power, now for me, that's God, and I'm a Christian, and
Right.
that's my background, but I honestly don't care if you believe in that or not. The
Right.
idea of a vocation is that something outside of you, something bigger than you, is calling you to go in a certain direction or do a certain thing. So when you think about that, that means our vocation is actually bigger than just our career. Our career is one place our vocation may show up. But your vocation, your calling, your purpose, your direction that you're being called to, that should show up in, well, how I'm a dad to my son, how I'm
Right.
a husband to my wife, how I'm a member of a church, how I'm a member of a board for a nonprofit, as well as what I do in my career. So vocation supersedes or is bigger than career when you look at it that way and you really step back and go to the definition of it.
Right.
And which means, by the way, that if you're doing something right now and you're like, this really isn't my thing, I'm just having to do it. Sometimes you do have to do a career for a while to help discover and uncover where your calling shows up. It's
Right.
okay to be uncomfortable in something you're doing. That's actually probably part of the process a lot of times.
Right. Well, I think one of the things I have begun to have some success with this podcast, which surprised the heck out of me. But one thing I didn't expect when I started the podcast, I didn't expect that I was going to enjoy it so much and interviewing people and how much I learn in the process.
Mhm.
But like for you, the business, this thing that you're doing, the thing that we're talking about today is a calling for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was even there before I was a coach. So what I mean by that is I spent 16 years as a school teacher. I spent 11 years in the corporate world. Looking back and reflecting on it now, I see the way that I showed up as a teacher is related to the way I show up as a coach. Guess what? It was also related to the way I showed up in corporate leadership, both for good and ill. There were things about the way I led as a leader in an executive position. I had a team of 180 people, lots of client work, on a plane all the time, flying around the country. But how I showed up was related to, for me, the same thing now that happens in the way I show up as a coach.
Right.
In that I'm very much, I'm Socratic. I tend to ask a lot of questions. I tend to be more focused in lifting other people up than myself. That's how I was as a teacher too. My mom's thing is, Scott, you've been a coach since you were 8. You just didn't call it that. It's like, yeah, exactly. I was.
Yeah.
I was always the guy in high school that I was always in the friend zone because I was the guy that all the girls wanted to ask advice about their boyfriend.
I can see that.
It was stinky whenever I was in high school as an adult male. Now it served me well, But, my current wife will go, yeah, that's why I married you. But that's in high school it's safe. But because again, it's really authentic to how you show up in the world. That's really what calling means. And it's, by the way, why we get stuck so often and feel uncomfortable so often is because when we're showing up one way in part of our life, and then being forced to show up a completely different way in another part of our life, we're out of alignment. That's when we get the cognitive dissonance. That's when our brain starts going, wait, one of these things is not like the other.
Like the other. You can tell we both watch Sesame Street.
I was going to say, everyone of a certain age is now singing that song, but that's okay.
So, well, I'm sure you'll agree with me that I feel like there's some people that feel stuck in just working. So where would be the first place that they should start with trying to uncover, if they can feel that cognitive dissonance and go, this is not it, where would they start trying to figure out where they go from here?
So I kind of want to step and you give a 2-part exercise. And this is literally something you can do. Jot this down while you're listening. You can actually do this in the next couple of days. So the first half is to look backwards. And the reason why I want to look backwards is we want to look at the pieces that have already presented to us, what's already shown up in our life, because a lot of times there's clues there. So this is a pretty simple activity. Take a sheet of paper. For those of us of more mature years, I'll put it that way, right. We might need a couple of sheets of paper, but take a sheet of paper or two, divide it into 3 columns, left hand, middle, right hand side. Down the left hand side, just start brainstorming everything you've done in your life. And let me be clear. I didn't say every job you've had, because that's usually where the first place people go. You can be broader than that. You can think about relationships. You can think about volunteering. You can think about all the different activities that you've done. Again, like I said, some of us of a more advanced age will need a couple of sheets of paper, if not more. Down the middle column, for each of those activities, write down 1 or more things that you enjoyed about that activity, things that gave you joy, things that fed you energy, things that you love, things that, when you did them, you were like, this clicks. I like this. Yeah. And again, you can be as broad or as deep as you want. And then down the last column, write something about that activity that didn't give you energy, something that didn't feed your soul, something that took away joy, those sorts of things. And I hesitate to use the word hate because that's a strong word, but the things that pulled you away, right? Begin to brainstorm. By the way, I don't care what the activity was or what the job was or what the thing you put down. You got to find at least one thing to put in each of those columns. Okay. Because there is nothing out there that is perfect, and there is nothing out there that is completely imperfect. You always get information, and there's always some little piece that is like, yeah, I hated everything about this, but man, when I got to do that, that felt good. Okay, great. Yeah. Put that one thing down. There's always something that you can put down in these columns. So just begin to brainstorm. And then it's a lot of times, by the way, this is a great activity to do over several days. Like, sit down and work on a little bit, and then let the back of your mind work, and then pull it back out and write some more things down.
At 3 o'clock in the morning, you'll think of another one.
Use this as a journaling activity. Use this as a reflection activity. By the way, I actually have a lot of folks that say this is really fun to do because they get a real, that we never think about all the stuff that we do in our life, but there's tons, right? And there's millions of things. Even a 22-year-old like my son, he's done this activity. He ended up with like 2.5 pages worth of stuff, and he's looking at it going, I never would have thought there was this much. It's like, we do a lot in our life. Put that down. So then you're going to look at this and start looking for patterns. What shows up over and over again in the love column? What shows up over and over again in the not so love column? What are the patterns that keep showing up? You may use different words to describe them, but you'll start noticing that there's certain activities that kind of show up in different ways, but they keep showing up over and over again that gave you energy. And the same thing for things that took energy away from you. So this is the information you already have. And again, I don't care if you're 14, 44, or 94, you got some level of history for what you've done already that you can draw from. So that's looking backwards. That's looking for the building blocks. That's looking for the information that already exists. But you mentioned we need to transition. We need to figure out where we're going. And going is a forward looking. So the second half of the activity is to do a forward looking activity, to begin to project yourself into the future. So here's how I do it. I mentioned earlier I was in the corporate world. I used to be on planes all the time. So I'm going to sit this in an airport, kind of in honor of that portion of my life where I spent a lot of time in airports. So imagine for a minute you've been on a trip. I don't care where it is. This is 5 years from today. So it's 5 years in the future. Those of you listening right now, if they're hearing this in those earbuds, this is something that you can begin to imagine and picture. Imagine it's 5 years in the future. You've been on a trip. And you know how a lot of times when you're flying back from a trip, you have that in-between airport. You know, you fly from one airport, you land, and then you change planes, and then you fly the rest of the way home. And as you're walking through that in-between airport, you get up to your gate, and you look up, and above the gate, it has those dreaded words, flight delayed. So you wait for a minute to talk to the person behind the counter, and you're like, flight's delayed. How long is the flight delayed? They go, we hate to tell you this, but it's like 4 hours. You're like, oh, great. So you do what anyone does when they're stuck in that kind of situation. In between, you go find a restaurant or a bar, depending on your particular flavor of poison and the time of day, to go hang out for a little while. So as you're walking in, I'm going to set it in a restaurant. I'm a teetotaler. I don't drink. So I'm a child of an alcoholic. So I choose not to drink. So I'm going to set it in an airport. I'm walking into this restaurant there in the airport. And as you're walking in, remember, 5 years from today, across the restaurant, you hear a voice. Hey, Bonita, how are you doing? And you're like, I haven't heard this voice in a while. And somebody comes walking up. It's a friend of yours, somebody you knew fairly well, but they moved away. You moved away. Y'all got busy. You lost track. You're in Hawaii for a year, whatever it is. You lost track of each other. And I've had this happen. Oh,
this
me too. It's like you're walking into a strange place, and so it's like, I haven't seen you since high school.
What are you doing here?
So what you have that moment, and they're like, how long are you here? You're like, I'm here for 4 hours now, unfortunately. They're like, well, I'm here for a few hours. Let's grab a table and catch up. You haven't talked to this friend for 4 or 5 years. It's 5 years in the future. You sit down at that corner table. Your friend looks at you and goes, man, you look great. How have things been? And you go, you know what? This has been the best 5 years of my life, because that's your job. Tell me what comes after the word because. What is showing up in your career? What is showing up in your relationships? What's showing up in your finances? What's showing up in your health? What's showing up in your entertainment? What's showing up in all of the different components of your life that would make you honestly say to somebody that's a dear friend of yours, somebody you're never going to lie to, you know what? This has been the best 5 years of my life. And here's why. This is happening and this is happening. And you know what's interesting? I've never had anyone sit down and write something like, I won $10 million in the lottery. That's not what makes us, value the last 5 years. It's other things. It's how we show up in the world. So between these two activities, what you end up with is a list of kind of building blocks and information and a little bit of an inkling of a roadmap of the direction you need to head. And then step back and go, okay, what is the next small action that I can take that would begin to move me in the direction of that 5-year plan? Based on what I've already got. What's the littlest, tiniest action I could take? And then go take it, And again, that's where you take theory and begin to put it into activity and action.
Well, do you believe that everyone has a calling, or do you think that it just sometimes just morphs because of experience or growth, or but in me thinking about that, I think everyone has God-given talents and things, and so maybe in that way we all have a calling. But do you think that people will, if they're attuned to this, or they can find it, or do you think it sometimes just fritters away because people never pay attention? I think there's I think what I want to ask you is, we get distracted, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We get so distracted that I think that people don't, when I was being asked, what do you want to call this podcast? I knew in my life that all of the things that all the mistakes I'd made had been because I hadn't asked the right questions. And so I knew that I wanted the name of my podcast to be Ask Good Questions.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
do you think that people get distracted so they never get here?
So I think it's a both and, not an either or. So here's what I mean by that. A lot of times we want to put things into box, everyone has a calling or no,
Yeah.
and the answer is yes to both of that. In that, I think everyone has a calling, but what you're asking is what happens for us to uncover it. And the truth is,
it's like,
it's not a destination. So we think of calling it, we're done. We found it. It's here.
Yeah.
It's not like that. It's the journey.
Yeah.
The journey is the calling. So yes, your calling can shift and change, and you can uncover it more authentically and deeper. And, I'm living my calling now in a different way than I was when I was a teacher. And I would argue in a way that feels more authentic. It feels like a better fit. It's better connected. All of those cognitive dissonance. But by the same token, I'm open to the idea that I may discover some things over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, however long I'm kicking around and sucking wind, that things that make me go, that's an even better fit. I need to add more of that into my life. So it's
an evolving.
It's both. Yeah, it's evolving all the time. It's growing.
Yeah. So, one of the things I was thinking about was like fleeting passions. And sometimes I've characterized myself as being subject to the bright, shiny objects. I've been drawn to this and drawn to that, and I've had interest in this and that. They're not really passions or callings, but they're interests. But I think that maybe those passionate things that we are interested in can lead to callings.
They can. So for those of you that are listening and not watching, there's a squirrel on the shelf behind me, right over my shoulder. There's a squirrel, and there's a reason I have a squirrel on a shelf, is because when I'm talking to people,
you like bright shiny objects.
We all do. Everyone does. But the question you need to ask is it a squirrel or is it an opportunity? Okay. So going back to that 5-year plan activity that we did earlier, what you're looking at is, hey, this thing is coming along. Is it something that seems like it might move me in that direction? Not going to get me all the way there, but by doing this, I might get a little bit more information, get a little bit more feedback, get a little bit more data, get a little bit more of an opportunity, whatever it is that kind of moves me in that direction, at least a little bit. Okay, that's clearly an opportunity if the answer to that is yes. If the answer is no, well, now I need to go a little deeper. Now I need to start thinking, how much time is it going to take? How much energy is it going to take? What is it going to pull me away from? What am I going to have to say no to be able to say yes to this thing? Because guess what? Every yes means a no. There's always an opportunity cost. I don't care if it's time. I don't care if it's money. I don't care if it's health. All of our life has opportunity costs. When we say yes to one thing, we're automatically saying no to something else. And so when you start realizing that, you can look at it and go a little deeper and go, what am I going to have to say no to say yes to this? And if what I'm saying no to is things that would move me in that direction, to say yes to something that's not going to move me in that direction, it's probably a squirrel. It's not really an opportunity. It's a squirrel.
Well, what do you think are some, do you think people sometimes have misconceptions or maybe are arguing with you right now, saying, but there's got to be some misconceptions about finding your true calling.
Well, one of them, I think, is that what we talked about at the very beginning. I think so many people think their calling and their career are synonymous, that what I get paid to do has to be the part of my life that is 100% my calling. And it's like, that's false on a million different levels. First off, I know people that go do something with their career that only overlaps with their calling a teeny tiny amount, but they use that to fund their ability to go over here and do something that's 100% alignment with their calling. Right. And so if you think about it, it's still showing up, big time, in their life, but they're able to compartmentalize and go, I'm going to do something over here that's not a perfect alignment. It's still not like it's completely out of alignment, but it's not perfect, so that I can go over here and express this in a much more authentic way. So it's that confusion. That's the biggest misconception I see, is this confusion that every single part of your life has to be 100% aligned with your calling for you to find authenticity and happiness. And it's like, I don't know anybody. I've yet to, maybe there's someone out there, but I haven't met them yet, because guess what? The laundry still has to get done. There's always something. There's some part of your life. And I know there's some people out there that love doing laundry, but the point is, there's some part of your life that you kind of go, I just kind of have to do this. I just have to, it's part of being alive. And you're never going to get perfect alignment. So stop looking for it. Stop thinking that that's the goal. That's not the goal. The goal is simply to be a little bit more aligned today than you were yesterday.
Right. Well, do you think that sometimes people put up internal barriers from living their calling?
I only if they're human.
That would be getting out of your own way.
Getting out of your own head and getting out of your own way.
Yeah.
The biggest internal barrier that I've seen, just from personal, and I've worked with over 1,000 clients in this area, so it's not just based on one or two things, is that belief that somehow we have to know all of the process and the end point. We have to know everything that's going to happen before we even get started. I have to know everything and then I'll get started. And it's like, guess what? Number one, you're never going to know everything. And number two, earlier when I said have that 5-year plan, let me give you a hint. You're not going to arrive at the destination in the picture that you wrote down. It's not going to be that picture. It will be different. That doesn't mean it will be worse, though, because that's the misconception is people will go, oh, well, if it doesn't work out exactly the way I thought, then it's bad. It's like, no, that's not what that means at all. A lot of times you'll uncover a destination that's 10 times better than what you thought. And you have to be open to that. And so all too often we close ourselves off to all of the great things because we're satisfied with the good things. And it's like, no. Good can destroy great actually more than bad can destroy great. It's easy. We get content.
I think that people, for me, I can remember that I had the, what do they call that when you say I'm not good enough?
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, the imposter. Yes. And I think mindset can play into self-sabotage.
Absolutely. It's all mindset. Again, I talk to people about time and money, right? You earlier, you said time, talent, and treasures. Here's the trick. People think the problem is time or money. That's not the problem. The problem is always talent, because it's not time or money. Those are just finite resources. You have a certain amount of time. You have a certain amount of money. What matters is how you relate to them, how you use them, how you think about them, the beliefs you have about them. It all comes down to beliefs and behavior. So when you look at a budget of money and you write numbers down, those numbers don't really matter. What matters is the beliefs and behaviors that are reflected in those numbers.
Right.
And that's mindset. That's what that is. So, I know people that they don't believe they deserve more. Yeah. Well, guess what? You're never going to get it then. And I know other people that think, it's no longer about deserving more. They think the world is obligated to give them more. They're not going to get it either, because both of those are false outlooks to how you relate to the world. And so it's when you get the mindset right, that's when you stop self-sabotaging, because fear of failure, self-sabotage. Fear of success, also self-sabotage.
Yeah.
It can be either end of the extreme, because I think a lot of times we just focus on the fear of failure part.
Right.
I actually have seen just as many people messed up by fear of success as by fear of failure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're making me think of, It's like, what, it's like, why not me? But like, whoa, what if I'm successful doing this? Then I have to show up.
What's that going to mean?
Yeah, what's that going to mean? Oh no, Mr. Bill. So what I want to ask you is, can you think of a time when you had to get out of your own way?
Absolutely. So one, I'll use kind of one example that's probably the most dramatic one in my life. But I've got, this is one of those, we could talk for the rest of the hour and keep going. Because that's like asking somebody, how much,
well, I'll have to have
give me a time that you screwed up.
I
It's like,
know, Scott, I already know that I got to have you on another time to continue this.
Well, that's fantastic. But what many years ago, back in early kind of when I was in transition between teaching and corporate, so I was kind of at the end of my teaching career. I was beginning to burn out on that. I hadn't yet transitioned to the corporate. My wife and I were deeply in debt, and kind of living like typical Americans, spend more than you make and do all of these sorts of things. We were actually in debt almost twice what I made in a year. And so we were about $68,000 in debt. I made a little less than $40,000 a year, that kind of thing.
Actually, with all of the different clients when I do all the intake of information, this is not that uncommon.
Not as weird as it sounds like, but and I actually had become suicidal because of finances. So it's actually the number one cause of male suicide is financial stress and financial worries, because a lot of men, myself included, look at ourselves as, we're the provider, we're the protector. It's a lot of our self-worth gets tied up in how well we provide for our family. And I was feeling like I was doing a terrible job. My wife would argue with me and tell me I wasn't, but I felt like I was. And I began to listen to talk radio. I drove home down this long, windy road, and I would listen to talk radio to keep myself awake while I was thinking about pretending like I fell asleep and driving off the road to commit suicide. Yes, I know that's ironic that I was listening to radio to keep myself awake so that I could pretend to fall asleep. But that was literally what was going through my mind. And they changed the lineup on the radio, and I kind of began to hear the change from I can't remember who it was, a Bill O'Reilly, I think, or something that I would listen to. And again, I really didn't care what was on. It was really just hearing somebody talk. And they changed it to Dave Ramsey show. And so I start hearing this Dave Ramsey show. He's talking about getting out of debt. He's talking about all of this stuff. They have people come on the show and start talking about being debt free. And I actually heard a story from a couple that was a lot like my wife and I. It wasn't exactly the same, but there was enough overlap.
Enough.
And I'm yelling at the radio. I'm arguing with the radio about how stupid this is, and then I hear this story that's kind of like, wait, that's actually kind of close to us. And they did it. Maybe there's something to this. And so I began to hear it a little differently. So I went that weekend, and one of the things he said is he had come clean with his wife and told her what he was feeling. This is the getting out of my own way part, because guess what?
See this coming.
I have a little bit of ego and a little bit of pride. I know it's shocking. I can't see any of that. And I was going to protect my wife, and I had sheltered her from all of this. My wife's a smart lady. She knew everything that
You're
was
going to be
on.
A man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all of that stuff is going on in my belief system and the way I was raised and all of these things. And I went and I sat down with my wife. I said, we need to talk. And we went and got in a private place and talked that weekend. And I said, this is what's going on. This is how much debt we have. She's like, yeah, I know. And because again, she's a smart lady. She knew what was going on, even though I was protecting her. She was protecting me by not adding to my stress. I'm protecting her by not adding to her stress, which basically meant we weren't talking to each other, which was the worst thing we could have done. So we agreed. We decided, hey, we're going to do something completely different. We're going to change how we're living. We're going to change what we're doing. And that's when we kind of came together, and I was able to get out of my own way, give up a lot of the pride and a lot of that. That's also when I returned to faith, and a lot of things changed in my life, and all of these dominoes kind of fell in the same direction. Changed careers, changed this, changed that. And in 2 years, 11 months, I'm not allowed to round that up to 3 years because my wife gets mad if I round it up to 3 years. So it's 2 years, 11 months. We ended up paying off $78,854.42. Not that I know it to the penny, but I know it to the penny. For anyone who's listening carefully, you'll notice that that number is bigger than the number I said at the beginning.
Yeah.
That's because in the middle of that, I changed careers. I had emergency surgery. I actually had a collapsed lung in December, and then had to go back in January to have surgery because the lung collapsed again. Anyone who knows how insurance works, that means I got to pay everything twice,
Yeah.
because one was in December and one was in January. So we ended up adding more to our debt before we got out of debt, and then basically worked to do that. Average income during that time was $55,000. And that's also where coaching came from, because all of a sudden people started showing up and going, y'all are weird. Do you think you could help us be weird? And it's like, well, sure, we could help you. And I started helping people first
So
as a
that's when you kind of
ministry, and
started your,
then
was that
bingo.
the 2011?
That was back in 2011. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got out of debt. We got out of debt in 2009. And so 2010, and I was kind of helping people, just friendly pro bono ministry through my church and stuff. And by 2011, I started turning it into a business and actually doing it, and getting paid. And then eventually took it full time.
Yeah. Did you start doing some, what helped that stick then? Because did you have some daily practices or habits that you developed for yourself? Because really, you can't coach people unless you've already done it yourself for yourself. I learned that a long time ago too.
I absolutely have daily habits and things and routines that I continue to this day. My wife and I continue to this day. We have weekly meetings about budget. I've done a budget every month since we started that process. But again, and I want to be careful when I say this, because people hear, oh, you've done a budget. That's what did it. That's not what did it. That's just the daily habit that lets us have a tool to communicate and be on the same page and agree about our decisions. And that's the important part. So don't miss the forest for the trees, because I have so many people come up, they're like, what's the perfect app? It's like, well, you are, you're the app. There is no tool out there that's going to fix your life. You got to fix your life. So it's that kind of realization. But yeah, that's the biggest routines and things that I've done, and been able to keep in place, to be able to keep the focus on the communication, the behavior, the mindset, those things.
So let's explore that. Okay, so you talked about time, talent, and treasures. How do those three intersect? If you step back, how do those three intersect? So
at the end of the day, it all really comes down to talent. So time and treasures are the symptom. So here's what I mean. If you have a problem, earlier you said finance and health are related. I would put time in that category too. I think those three things are related. Well, why are they related? Because your mindset and your behaviors and your beliefs are reflected in your time, your money, and your health, because they create the habits, the routines, the structure, all of that stuff. That's where it shows up. So if you think of time and money and health, those are symptoms, but the core problem, comes back to between your ears and in your heart.
Yeah.
What you believe and that reflects in your behavior. And that's why, again, I talk about time, talent, and treasures, because usually where we're seeing it, where we're feeling the alignment problem, is in our time or our money. For time, it comes down to usually some version of, I'm too busy to do what's important. So people will say things like, I'm too busy to make it to my daughter's soccer game. That's a reflection of a misalignment of priorities.
Right.
It's actually not that you're too busy. It's that you've put a priority on something above your soccer game. You've chosen. With money, I'm too broke. I make too much money to feel this broke. That's an example of something someone would say. Again, what that is really reflecting is a misalignment between how you're using your money and how you really think you should be using your money. Your deep-seated beliefs are causing a misalignment.
Yeah. I mean, so I can see there where if someone discerns, well, let's say that somebody is saying, how can I tell if I'm investing my talents in the right places? It sounds like it's going to get back to individual choices that you make every day.
Absolutely. Always. The tiny choices that we make aren't tiny. You know, we think they are, but they're not. It's again, and I've had the same experience as you. I'm working with somebody on time, or I'm working with somebody on money, and they come back later and they're like, I'm losing weight. Why am I losing weight? And it's like, well, it's real easy. You start getting disciplined in one area of your life, it naturally makes you more disciplined in other areas.
Right. Yeah.
Because discipline is a belief and a mindset. And so it
Right.
just spills over. And so it's not that we sat down and said, stop eating so much. You just naturally started eating better and taking better care of yourself, you
Right.
know, and it's, I didn't have to tell you to do it. Same thing. It always happens that way. And by the way, I think it happens in reverse too. I know health coaches that are like, they started getting healthier and all of a sudden their money started getting straight. You know, how did that happen? You know,
Yeah.
it's like, well, same thing. You know, it's because the core is that discipline and that habit and the behaviors and the beliefs and so often we don't even know what our limiting beliefs are. They're invisible to us.
Oh no.
That internal dialogue is invisible. Yeah.
So you've gotten into personality types, right?
Mhm.
Maybe what we'll do is we'll do a thing about that one of these days. But do you think that understanding personality types and like taking some of I actually did a few of them not too long ago. And I think aren't you involved in the Enneagram?
I know I'm familiar with Enneagram. I do not use Enneagram. I use DISC. The only reason I use DISC is not because it's better or worse. And, you know, there's Myers-Briggs, there's StrengthsFinder,
Right.
there's a million of
Yeah.
them out there. Here's my problem with all of them except DISC. I'm not smart enough to carry it around in my head.
Yeah.
DISC is simple enough that I can carry it around in my head and I can use it in real time with people. All the other stuff requires more instrumentation than I've got.
Okay. Well, but do you think that sort of thing can help you get some clarity?
Absolutely. Because all of those things, by the way, none of them are good or bad. They're all just tools, right? They're insights that we can get. You know, God has made us in a certain way. This is my belief. God has made us in a certain way. I don't think any of these instruments gives us a complete picture, you know, of our whole design. I think all of them are glimpses through a little pinhole, you know, to let us see a glimpse of some of that wiring that we've been built with. And so all of them are useful in the fact that they begin to give you insight. We're right back to the same thing, into beliefs and behaviors that you naturally have a tendency towards. Right. And as you become aware of it, it lets you begin to use them where they're strengths and mitigate them where they're weaknesses. Because guess what? Every one of them is a strength and everything is also a weakness. By definition, if you have a strength, it has to create a weakness. It just does. It's because nobody's so perfectly well-rounded as to be strong in all components. You know, that would make us God. You know?
Yeah, I was going to say, wait a minute. There's only one that I know of.
And if, you know, I don't know about you, but one of the best days of my life was when I realized there was a God, and the second best days when I realized it wasn't me. You know? It's like, that's as I tell people, that's above my pay grade. I don't get to make that decision. Right. But as we get insights into ourselves, it lets us communicate better. It lets us understand each other better. It lets us understand ourselves better. And all of those things together begin to help us understand our beliefs and our behaviors. So now we can get more in alignment.
Well, Scott, I have loved this conversation. And so, like I said, you're going to be on again. I can tell, because I have a whole bunch of other things I want to talk to you about, but not today.
I'm happy to come on anytime.
Okay. So for listeners who feel like it's too late, or, you know, that I can't change direction, what would you say to encourage people to take a look at this?
If you are sucking wind, it's not too late. So as long as you are breathing, it is not too late. So my mother just turned 85. Okay. Guess what? My mom is still learning new things because, you know, that's what she believes, and that's who she is, and that's how she lives her life. So there is no too old. My great grandmother died at 90, I think 94, 95 years old. My great grandfather died. I've had all these long lived people, and I have all these great examples of looking at people that live their life well. Yeah. And then I also have some examples in my family of folks that didn't, right? The point isn't, well, they were too old or they were too young. The point is their attitude and their philosophy. Yeah. And they're, that's what kept them
Whether
alive.
You think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. The Henry Ford quote. Yep.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're not too old.
Never.
What's one powerful question they can ask themselves today? What
do you want out of life? Another version of that, if the same question but phrased a different way. So for people that question hit wrong, what do you want to be when you grow up? And by the way, I don't care if you're 85, you can still ask yourself that question.
Those are good questions, Scott.
Well, I hope so. I tried to come on with good questions. That's the name of the show.
All right, we've got to wrap it up, Scott. So just to remind everybody, on my website, I have a place where I put all the information about my guests. So in a couple of days, that information about Scott will be there. So you can go, and if you want to follow up with him after this, then all the information about where to find him will be there. So with that, thank you so much, my friend, for joining me today.
Absolutely. I'm honored to be here, and I hope you that are listening, you just got some value out of that and take action on it.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining the Ask Good Questions podcast. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Today's episode is over, but we did ask good questions again, didn't we? Don't miss out as we broadcast live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio at W4CY.com. Join Benita Bell Anderson next week for more conversations with experts on finances, retirement, behavioral finance issues, health and wellness, and more. Until then, remember to ask good questions.